today, especially since we have our Freedom Fund banquet tonight in a few hours. But I was thinking, when I graduated from law school in 1970, I thought we had turned the curve on the civil rights issue. I thought we were moving to a position where African Americans were going to be players in this society just like whites and everyone else. But the statement by the owner of the Houston, Texas, Bob McNair, lets me know that rather than moving forward, we have moved backwards to the 50s. When the owner of a major athletic team in Houston, Texas, today can characterize black athletes in the NFL as prisoners, especially when you're talking about African Americans, and you know how repulsive crime is to us, to use that as the inmates running the institution. Characterizing black athletes as inmates is deplorable. His apology is not accepted. Saying, I didn't know anyone would be upset by what I said is even worse, because it shouldn't matter whether anyone had been upset. What he said was improper. So we're here to say, not only are we upset with what Bob McNair said, but we think putting a statue of Bob McNair, please, Bob McNair, forgive me.
All right.
Putting a statue of Bob McNair on a public facility is the wrong thing to do, and we're here to say that we are opposed to it. There are other people who are going to speak on this issue, and next we're going to have the commissioner of Harris County.
Rodney Ellis, not Rodney Dangerfield. I'm going to post a statement on social media shortly, so I'm not going to read it other than one paragraph of it. NFL players are protesting inequality in our country. And when their employer responds by calling them inmates in a prison, he not only shows why the protests are needed, he shows that he hasn't even thought about the meaning behind the protests. We ought not lose sight of the fact that Harris County is really ground zero for criminal justice reforms. Major bail litigation. The county spent about $5 million fighting it. If we implement what the court has said we ought to do, it'll be a model for the rest of the country. So that's why it's so important. And I'm so grateful that the NAACP, our congressman, another congressperson may come as well, are willing to speak out on this issue. These players are protesting because there are racial inequalities in this country. They were there before they got their hands on the ball. And unfortunately, some of them may still be there when their hands are no longer on the ball. And that's why it is so important for us to respect that right. I think we ought to do as much as we can to use this moment to not just let Mr. Bob McNair apologize. That's fine. In fact, if there's anything I've said that is untoward and you find out about it, I'm going to apologize too. We ought to use this as an opportunity for Mr. McNair, as well as any of the other owners, to get out front in front of solving racial inequalities in the criminal justice system in this country. And the last point I want to make is, the worst thing we could do would be to glorify someone who made comments like this, inadvertent or not, and put them on a pedestal in front of a publicly financed facility. There's a reason why we've had all these protests around this country about statutes, by the way. Why do we do that? Why is this country generally littered with statutes of certain people who are in charge and they get to write history? And then it makes all our children think they ought to glorify them and try to follow in their footsteps. Anytime you're going to honor someone with a statue, it ought not be because they're your neighbor or they're a relative or they're a friend of yours. It ought to be because you believe in what they stood for. and you want to encourage others to do that as well. That's why I'm opposed to this statute, and that's why the county ought to back up as Sports Authority Board and say they are not going to put that statute up. The process now is they voted to do it. It doesn't go to Commissioner's Court. They need to retract that vote. Thank you.
We will now hear from Bishop Dixon, who's also a member of the NAACP, but pastor of one of the largest churches in the city.
Thank you, President Douglas, and to our elected leaders and all who assembled today. Racism continues to plague America. In a closed-door meeting with NFL owners and colleagues and NFL execs, Bob McNair makes the statement, we can't have inmates running the prison. This was described by attendees as a warning to his colleagues who are other NFL team owners. Today we have gathered, as you've heard, to express not only our disappointment, somewhat our disbelief, but also our outrage that such statements are made by a person of his stature. And let me say quickly, I do concur with others who've spoken that this is grounds certainly not to have a statue erected in honor of someone who makes such statements. The statement made by Mr. McNair, as he expressed in his written apology, he said, I didn't know anyone would be offended. Beyond being offended, we are insulted. We're insulted on behalf of all of the African-American players on the Houston Texans team and all other teams, because those statements characterize a context that suggests that the owner of this team and perhaps others deems players to be less than equals. The disregard, the disrespect is beyond our comprehension. We're calling for action. Today we want to announce that we want to give Mr. McNair the opportunity, and I think he needs it, to explain to the citizens of this city, his constituents, many of whom are Texans fans, exactly what he did mean. He says he did not mean to suggest anything that would be incendiary. Well, come and explain what you absolutely meant. He said he was not referring to the players on his team or in the NFL. He needs then to come forward to explain of whom he spoke. Who was he referring to? The citizens of this city, the players deserve to hear that. We deserve to hear that. And so on Monday, this coming Monday, we're inviting him to a community forum of leaders from across the city and citizens across this community, such that he can explain himself regarding these comments. But then we need to talk about how we have a healing path forward. What must be done in order for the community and the society to know that the apology really has weight, because words without actions are weightless. We must have healing in this city, and leaders have to do it. And when you make those remarks, then you've got to step forward to champion reconciliation. Thank you to our host, the NAACP. Tonight's gala does demonstrate the fact that we need the NAACP now more than ever, because America still is not one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. We pray that that day comes. Thank you very much.
We're going to have only 3 more speakers. This is the Houston branch. We're not the only branch that actually is serviced by the Houston Texans. We have a neighborhood branch, the Missouri City branch, so we're going to ask the president of the Missouri City branch to come forward and make some comments.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you guys. I have a statement that I will be releasing, but I'm going to just go by a little bit that I have right now. This is about U.S. citizens peacefully, respectfully, and quietly taking a knee. In the same respect matter, we teach our children, at least, to take a knee when a fellow player is hurt on the field. We teach our children that taking a knee is a sign of respect. The Missouri City and Vicinity Branch is proud of our nation's professional athlete. They are demonstrating as role models that peaceful and respectful protests are a powerful tool in promoting justice, equality, and standing up for civil rights. These courageous athletes are reminders of the peaceful protest against discrimination in our past. The need for social justice today against discriminations through respectful, dignified, peaceful protests. I stand here before you in giving you no further attention. Those who seek to deny the athletes' rights, I stand against you when you deny their rights. To the coach, the owner, Bob McNair, we do not accept you having a statue in your honor. NAACP Missouri City and Branch is totally against that. That represents disrespect to our country, our citizens, and our state. Thank you.
We're one of the few cities in the United States that are blessed with 2 champions in the U.S. Congress. And one of those champions, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, the 18th Congressional District, we're going to ask her to come make a few comments.
President Douglas, thank you so very much for gathering us together. National Board Member Jefferson, thank you so very much. To all of the pastors, clergy that are here, as well, the president of the Missouri City NAACP, we're very proud of that chapter. And Bishop Dixon, thank you. I think I'm not leaving out anyone besides who I will be acknowledging next, which is, of course, Commissioner Ellis, of whom we are very appreciative of his leadership. And I am just ecstatic to be standing here with my colleague as we stand in tandem together working on behalf of the constituents of our communities. And I think with Congressman Green and myself, and certainly there are other representatives, we have certainly a large portion of this particular community. I represent the NAACP in their House, and Congressman Green represents the House of the Texans. I want to take just a moment to be able to say that Houston is proud of its diversity. We are a community that many of us stand in Commissioner's Court and City Council to brag about Houston, our mayor, our many elected officials who come from a diverse community, including South Asians, the religious diversity that we have. And so you can imagine how hurt and disappointed I am for those comments. For those comments generate thought. They have to have come from thought and beliefs. And I think it is important that more than an apology, which we greatly appreciate, that we follow in the call that has been made, that this has to be resolved face to face. This has to be resolved with thought that is good. And it has to be resolved to have a new image. And this does not go to the Texans only. I have worked with the NFL for a very long time, starting with the issues of concussions and antitrust issues on the Judiciary Committee. And it troubles me that for all that period of time, the owners consider these young men something less than human beings. It troubles me that they are in fact a commodity. And I think that that is the concern. So let me share with you. Braxton Miller, wide receiver, Ohio State University graduate, degree in communications. Quarterback, Deshaun Watson, Clemson graduate, degree in communications. Brian Peters, education, Northwestern University, degree in learning and organizational change. Stephen, or it might be Stephen Anderson, University of California, degree in public health. I don't know why any of these individuals would bring to your attention the example of inmates running the prison. For it brings to mind the stereotype of African American men in incarceration, hurting families and hurting our history. These young men, many of whom have come from challenging beginnings from which they have had to overcome, take to the fields all over America through the NFL and provide great camaraderie, sportsmanship, and excitement on game day. Their act of taking a knee is simply their right to protest and petition their government for the grievances under the First Amendment. This Constitution is something that more people need to read. The people who have intimidated, or not intimidated, excuse me, the people who have attacked Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, those who have attacked me, those who've attacked Congressman Green in our national and public statements, they need to read the Constitution. President Trump needs to read the Constitution. For it says in the First Amendment, not only to the NAACP, you have the freedom of speech and the freedom of press, but you have the freedom to petition your government through its grievances, through your grievances. Colin Kaepernick had grievances, legitimate grievances. Those who are taking a knee are joining because those grievances have not been addressed. And those grievances play into what we're now facing, which is the comments that have to be resolved. So my final point is to simply say this. We need to engage in real hard discussions to rise above the perceptions we have of each other. A meeting should be set up immediately, as has been said, because we need to be able to go beyond the perceptions of all of us. And we need to end racial conflict. There needs to be an outreach. There needs to be a solution. We have to work together. And we cannot not do anything. I offer to say that although many years ago we sang the song, "We Shall Overcome," we are on that journey. And I expect to sing that song in this community on this issue, that we have overcome. We need to accept Commissioner Ellis's very wise suggestion that there should be diversity and recognition at the Texans Stadium, because many helped build that magnificent place. Those that we know, from Errol Campbell to Warren Moon and many others. Let's show what this community represents, and let's show it in the right way by ending the stereotypes.
We'll now hear from Congressman Alexander Green, the 9th Congressional District.
Thank you, President Douglas. Friends, this is about more than Mr. McNair. This is about a president, Donald John Trump, who has incited persons to make statements. It's about a president who, by his words, deeds, and actions, has caused people to move towards xenophobia, toward nativism, towards sexism, toward hatred and bigotry. This is about more than Mr. McNair. Mr. McNair is but one symptom of a greater problem. This president is bringing the level of discourse down to a level that is intolerable and unacceptable. Mr. McNair, you have apologized. An apology is an admission of an offense, but the apology is not the atonement necessary for the grievance that has been created. So, Mr. McNair, you have to do more than apologize. One of the things that you should consider doing is making it clear to others that you do not desire to have the statue of yourself placed before the stadium. You can stop it. You have the power. This is your opportunity to atone for your transgression, Mr. McNair. You ought to do so. This is about more than Mr. McNair, because there are people who think that these players are personal property. They are not. They are not victims of servitude. These players are men. And the president started a lot of this. He was the genesis of it when he used the term SOB. He said, SOB referring to the players. for edification purposes, that's saying that a player is a son of a dog. That is a disrespect of motherhood, because you're saying that the player's mother is a bee, that's a dog. This is unacceptable, Mr. President. This is unacceptable, Mr. McNair, and you ought not allow this president to give you reason to believe that you can receive some degree of comfort after having made such a statement about players being inmates. So, Mr. McNair, this is your opportunity. But it's not going to stop with Mr. McNair, friends. This president has committed many impeachable offenses. You don't have to commit a crime to be impeached. Andrew Johnson was impeached, and he did not commit a crime in Article 10 of the Articles of Impeachment. This president has to be removed from office because of the harm that he is perpetrating upon our society. It is not something that we have to wait for. We don't have to wait until the next election. We don't have to just talk about impeachment. There are articles pending before the Congress, and I assure you I'm going to bring impeachment to the floor of the Congress of the United States of America such that there will be a vote on impeachment. Now, finally, this on the players. There are people who say they're millionaires. They're making a lot of money. They ought to be happy with the money that they're making. Are you saying that this is hush money? Are you saying that they should be so pleased that they should take their money and not be concerned about the causes of justice? When they are taking a knee, they are respecting the flag. In fact, they're trying to make real the great and noble ideal expressed in the words, in the Pledge of Allegiance, liberty and justice for all. So that's what this is all about. Liberty and justice for all, and that includes the many who have been harmed at the hands of the constabulary. Not all of the members of the constabulary are to be blamed, but we do have some police officers who harm people, and many of them have done it with intentionality. So this is bigger than Mr. McNair. And Mr. President, you don't have to suffer what the players and what other people suffer after you incite and go back to the White House. My constituents suffer. Other people are picking up on your terminology. We will not tolerate it. We want that statute to never go up so that we will never have to protest it, and we won't have to ask that it come down. Mr. Douglas, President of this branch of the NAACP, I want to thank you for hosting this press conference. I thank my colleague, Jackson Lee. This is the 18th Congressional District. I'm honored to be here. I want to thank Bishop Dixon, who has been a rallying point for us at his church. I want to thank Mr. Jefferson, who's on the board of the National NAACP, Commissioner Rodney Ellis, because this is his precinct wherein this the stadium is and the statue may go up. And I want to thank the President of the Missouri City branch of the NAACP as well. Derek Muhammad is here. He has been a friend of this community and involved in most of the fights that take place for freedom, justice, and righteousness. And finally, I thank all of the members of the press. I hope you'll take this message as it was presented, and members of the clergy who are present as well, but members of the press, take this message as presented. I'm a troublemaker, and I want to make sure that we make some good trouble. Rosa Parks was a troublemaker. Dr. King was a troublemaker. Troublemakers change the world for the better. That's what we want to do. It's bigger than Mr. McNair. It's really about Donald John Trump, who ought to be impeached.
First, I'd like to remind you, later this afternoon, we will get a formal invitation to Mr. McNair, inviting him to the session on Monday evening. So we will also send the press a copy of that formal invitation. So if you'd like to attend Monday evening to hear the discussion with Mr. McNair, we don't want to jump to conclusions. We want all of Houston to know what his real thought process is, and we want him to know personally how offended we are by what he said and why we do not accept his apology. With that, we will take questions.
Do you know where or when on Monday yet?
The Community of Faith Church, 1024 Pinemont.
One more time, sir.
The Community of Faith Church, 1024 Pinemont, at 7 o'clock p.m.
Thank you.
It's in the fofo. You don't know that neighborhood.
The neighborhood home.
Fofo. Ask me a turn away.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, just given, I guess, the discord and given previous things that happened like this, do you guys expect there to be any kind of, I guess, how much blowback do you expect there to be from this, and what do you think that really says about our society and where we are as far as racial progress goes?
When you say blowback by whom, and what are you,
I
how
guess-
are you
I guess-
defining blowback?
How do you see this playing out, just in general, and what?
Well, so much depends on what Mr. McNair says. I can tell you the whole of the African American community is upset by what he said.
Not just here.
Right.
It's around the country.
Right.
CNN.
There are pastors and organizations from around the country sending emails in support of the stance that we're taking here today. This issue is national, it's not local. And I think we want to communicate the fact, as our president has said, and the congressional representatives, we are not limiting this to a comment. This is becoming a culture. We have a flaw in the culture of the United States of America that seems to make it permissible, tolerable, and acceptable for individuals to express themselves. Now, I've got to be honest with you, I have bittersweet. I hate to hear the expression, but I'm glad to know it exists. Because if this exists in one's heart, then we need to understand that. Because out of the mouth flows the issues of the heart. That's what the scripture teaches. So we need to understand what's the real heart of these persons. And we've got children aspiring to play in the NFL. They need to understand that if I make it to the NFL, I'm playing with someone who sees me as an inmate as opposed to a professional. So this is very much deeper than that.
And we understand Mr. McNair's politics. We know he gave millions of dollars
Yes.
to support the president. We also know he gave thousands of dollars to support the anti-hero movement. So we understand what his politics are, all right? But just because you have a political position doesn't mean you also have to have a racist position.
So I just want to add, when we met briefly before coming up to talk to you all, I woke up this morning trying to find an orange shirt to wear tonight.
Yeah.
And I assume that's what the focus was for most of us. The first call I got was from somebody in another state. It was from Roland Martin. And I was wondering, man, what are you talking about? Then I got a call from a couple of business people asking me what I thought about the statute now. So look, this is an evolving, this is not a one press conference pony. You got it?
No.
So we've been talking to our religious leaders, our academic leaders, our congressional people. You know, I called a number of my colleagues and elected officials, but there's a lot going on in Houston there, but we don't plan to stop here.
What's it gonna take?
I'd like to comment just. You want to answer your question?
I was gonna ask, what is it gonna take for you to accept Mr. McNair's policy, apology?
We will
Is it
offer
the
that.
meeting?
We will offer that on Monday.
So I don't want to step in front of that, but I want to answer the blowback question because I think this is singular and significant. I don't know if our struggle really has been since slavery. I don't know whether those who attempted to revolt got blowback, escape got blowback, to speak back got blowback. And there comes a point when blowback is not significant. What is significant is when in America will we put an end to the comfortableness with this thought or thoughts like this. And so in addition to these men and women who are standing here, Pastor Deckard is here, and no, we acknowledge him, but in addition to the men and women who are standing here, there's a vast array of Hispanics, Yesterday in the United States Congress, we spent all day condemning them and pushing legislation from the Trump administration to condemn them and to take rights away. There are Muslims here. There are people of all backgrounds. I really think the question, and we thank the media for being here, you don't know how hurting this is. We're standing here, but people are in pain. And our community is in pain. So the real question that we ask today, and there will be another meeting, is who will be standing with us? Where is corporate Houston, corporate America? Because there are many occasions and incidences where they rush to be seen and heard. But when the question of race comes, and I hope this question is asked in the media, where are those who will rush toward us? But when we make a comment that involves our pain and race, when race is the issue, we are race baiting. We have nothing else to say but race. We are defined, and particularly members of the United States Congress, they do not know any of our portfolio. They ignore our work in Hurricane Harvey recovery. But the question should be asked, because this is going to be a minuscule probably clip, sadly. So my question is, as I look forward, it is, where is Houston with its wonderful diversity and the powers that sit around tables in corporate Houston to recognize that they can speak on that pain? That pain is sufficient to be spoken of. And I would frankly say, as I said, respecting Congresswoman Wilson, we're just not going to take it anymore from the perspective of being silent, and we're going to ask others why they are not addressing this. And I'm going to my seat, President Douglas, but I just want to do this. These are the inmates that, if you connected the dots of the conversation, would be who they were speaking of. Degreed men, some of whom may be fathers, brothers, sons, husbands. These are the degreed men. And I think that beyond any of us, these men need to be apologized to, maybe even individually, because they work for their salary. They work for their compensation. Enough is enough.
What do you think people can do to sort of let their feelings be known about this?
We're going to deal with this on Monday night. We will have a detailed plan coming out of Monday night. We're not going to plan what we're going to do until we find out exactly what Bob McNair's response is. One closing statement, and I know you didn't mean it, but I asked, what do you mean by blowback? Because I found blowback a response to a racist statement by African Americans. It's not a blowback. All right. So I want to. I know you didn't mean it. All right. But I take blowback. Blowback as being something negative. All right. So
I have a question. What do you say to those people that say he didn't mean that literally? It was just an expression.
well, you have to know the right expressions to use. Your expressions cannot be racist. All right. You know, the president makes a lot of just making expressions. SOB, he would say, was just an expression. All right. Groping people, women, is just an expression. I can stand on Fifth Avenue and kill somebody and it won't be prosecuted. It's just an expression. All right. So, I understand, but right.
An expression, the word expression, X-E-X means out, press, to press out.
Right.
You can't press out of a person what's not inside. Right. So when you say it is an expression, it's exactly that. Right. It's a pressed out idea and understanding and belief. That is exactly the problem that we're confronting today. And that's why we have to speak to this in a larger context.
I'm honored that you asked the question because we're talking about words.
Yes.
And
Emily Dickinson reminds us that a word is dead when it is said, some say. I say it just begins to live that day. When you make those expressions, you give life to words.
Yes.
And there is a common denominator here that we have to acknowledge. It is the president. It's the president who, at a meeting with some law enforcement officers, gave them some indication that they can abuse people who are in their care, custody, and control, which would be against the Constitution. It was the president who said that SOBs, meaning women, are dogs. It's the president who called a congresswoman wacky. The president is the common denominator. The president is bringing the level of discourse down to an unacceptable level. We cannot ignore the fact that this is bigger than Mr. McNair. This goes all the way to the top, to the presidency of the United States of America, and he's harming a lot of people who have to suffer after he makes his comments.
In the light of what you saw with the Los Angeles Clippers with Donald Sterling, do you see a similar situation happening here with a change in ownership due to the words that were said?
I think we already said we will respond after Monday night. I want to recognize Mrs. Phyllis Jones, who is a member of our school board. With that, we're going to close the press conference. If you have some individual questions you want to ask any of us, you can do so after the press conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.